In 1890, Johannes Brahms announced that he was done composing, and he announced that he was finished. He'd done everything he wanted to do, and that was it. And then a short time later, he started to write music again, so he couldn't stay away from it. And in 1893, he published a set of piano pieces, among other things that he wrote in that time, Opus 118. It was a set of 6 piano pieces, and these were dedicated to Clara Schumann, and his friend said he wrote them for her. And so that, he obviously was still writing, and so he continued to write at that point. But that was in 1893. He was 4 years away from dying, so this was really at the end of his life. I have played pieces from the beginning of his life, and these were very much at the end of his life. This particular piece is number 2 that I just played the opening bars of. And that is one of the most popular pieces I think that he wrote, even for any instrument. Very popular piece that you hear many play in concerts and the like. So something that is of pieces that he's composed, a very popular piece. Some people try to take this set, because it is dedicated explicitly for Clara Schumann, to say something about the relationship that did exist between Clara Schumann and Johannes Brahms. And there's been much written about that. You can make what you want of it, and certainly people in general have made a lot of it. You have a wide gamut of views about it, and what his music means, and trying to interpret his music in terms of that relationship or lack thereof, or what have you. And I think it's probably instructive to know what Brahms himself thought if you're going to go to the point of trying to dissect him in terms of what was going on in his life. You might as well hear from the man himself if you're going to go there. And so he said he had a very explicit view of this, which was that he despised it. He despised the very idea that a composer of music, or perhaps a creator of art in general, should be judged in terms of the whole, should have himself or herself and the work itself judged in some historical context. He thought that was awful, just ridiculous from his point of view. And he despised the very notion of that for a lot of reasons, some personal, some perhaps more academic and philosophical. But he hated it. And so much so that he instructed his friends to burn all of his correspondences with them, the letters and the like. And he did the same. Not all of them were, so we do have something to go on in terms of trying to understand Brahms and his life. But nonetheless, he was very adamant about it, and he told people, burn everything, after I'm gone. I don't want people reading my stuff and listening to my music in terms of what I was writing about at, the trials and tribulations of my life at some point in time. That was, to him, just ridiculous to understand art in that sense. And I totally agree with him, actually, in my personal opinion. I think that's also very true. It's very much a folly to take someone's life, their words, and so forth, and use that as some kind of benchmark to judge their music and understand it. And he was very adamant about it. So he thought, art really should be judged apart from the everyday practical life that a composer might have, because it may or may not bear any real relationship to it. And more likely it won't. And even if it does, it's really momentary. You can go there if you want to and talk about historical context, and I do. And certainly it's interesting to do so because it gives you sort of a jumping off point to think about things. But you should take it with a grain of salt and not be wedded to it like, gee, it has to be that way. So in any event, like I said, he was at the end of his life at this stage of the game. So to give you other historical context for it, besides the fact that these were dedicated to Clara Schumann, and that was a profound relationship for him for sure. But he was also at the end of his life worth considering that even though he didn't know he was going to die 4 years later, he already was looking back and sort of casting doubt in himself on what he had achieved or didn't achieve, and really felt like all his work for a particular set of artistic aims, goals, and ideals that he was trying to advance as well as preserve and bring forward, that he felt it was all sort of in vain. The modern age was coming. The romantic era of the 19th century was ending, and he could see that. And the turn of the century, the 20th century, was just around the corner at this stage of the game, 1893. And so he saw a lot of what he had tried to do as ultimately failing. The musical world wasn't embracing what he was trying to do at all. And modernism was coming, and he didn't see that, at least at that point, as being anything good. He didn't see anyone around him, musicians-wise, that were going to keep going with the same kinds of things he was trying to do. Although there were, but he didn't see them at that point, nor did he see that he thought it was all what he was doing would be lost, basically. So he had every reason to be a bit downbeat about what was going on, and he just didn't see. Gosh, what have I been doing this for all these years? It was a waste of time. But he, like I said, he continued to compose, and here he was. He came back to it, and he would compose some more before his health finally started to take a downward turn, and he ultimately died 4 years later. This particular piece I played the opening bars for, and number 2 of the Opus 118, and it's worth just for a second just considering that opening figure before we get to the whole thing. That opening figure, he takes that and really turns it around every which way to really spin this whole piece. You hear that opening figure come back and back and back and back again, over and over and over again in the piece, but in various types of guises and different ways. He turns it around, inside out, upside down, backwards, forwards, what have you, every permutation, and then some. And really spins this whole piece out of that small figure in a lot of ways. And so it's worth considering that here's a guy who at this point, towards the end of his life, was one of the, knew a lot obviously about composing, composed a lot. And this is really an example of just how much he knew about creating a piece of music. And so much so that he carefully constructed this using that figure and all that he knew, but did so in such a way that it sounds very natural, almost simple, as if someone just sat down and just played it in a moment of inspiration. And it was carefully constructed. Brahms was a very methodical, practical man, and so he didn't do anything, and that's in some kind of spontaneous way. That wasn't part of his nature, really, in a lot of ways. But he constructed this, carefully, and crafted it and put it together and made it do what he wanted it to do. And in the end, it doesn't sound like it at all. And so it's worth considering that, if nothing else, as a piece of art. That it's really a remarkable piece of craft for someone who knew so much about music at this stage of the game. That he constructed this in such a way and achieved what ultimately would be a simple result. And I think it echoes other composers who you read and you understand when they say as well that you work all your life as a composer, as a musician, to achieve a simplicity. And this is another example of that. I think Bartók also said something similar about that. That in simplicity there was power in music, and so Brahms, I think, also knew that, and so he worked all his life to achieve a certain simplicity of a form and a directness that was hard to achieve from a composer point of view, while also using all that you knew. And the simplicity was what ultimately composers are after, both whether they were of one style or another. And so this is a pretty good example, I think, of that, where he was It's carefully constructed. You can really analyze this from a musical point of view in so many kinds of ways. But it's carefully constructed, put together, intricate, and yet it doesn't sound like it. And so that's like I said, a remarkable achievement at this stage of the game for him. So with that, I will play Opus 118 number 2. Again, I'm going to play the first theme. I can't play the whole thing, so understand that. So I don't know how. I don't have the ability to do it. But the first theme I can at least barely manage. But that's what I'll play. I play the first theme, and that works out okay because the first theme comes to a satisfying kind of a conclusion before the next part begins. And so it can sort of stand by itself, and it sounds okay just by itself. It sounds like a complete piece. But be aware that if you've never heard this before, that there's more to it. So I'm just going to play the first theme. I can manage that part. So right now you got, I'm going to give you Johannes Brahms's Opus 118 from a set of 6 pieces that he composed, Opus 118 from 1893. This would be number 2.